Research has clearly proven that black women are the most marginalized in society. And there's a whole history about why that. I mean, you can read all the articles and academic research and all that. But one of the reasons they gave was that black women fall between the cracks of two very important conversations. When society is looking at racism, it's usually through the experience of black men. When they're looking at discussing gender, it's usually white women. So then essentially we become invisible. I've actually sat around executive tables and felt invisible. You asked me about how I feel about being at the Mint. I'm there almost a year and I still feel the same way I felt the first few days I was there. I sit around tables and I'm valued, I'm heard. And for black women, that's not common at all. If you don't take the time to understand who you have in your environment, in your work organization, you're not going to be prepared for the future. In fact, you're doing yourself a disservice. The most diverse teams are the most effective teams. My story began in the former Rhodesia, currently Zimbabwe, but was former Rhodesia, living in a segregated society so rigidly that you could not be found walking in areas that were designated white. You know, I made a decision one day to apply to the police force because my father's name was white sounding. If you were a person of mixed race, you could not become a police officer. So I was deemed a person of mixed race. And then if you were white, you became a police patrol officer, and the highest rank you could attain was commissioner of police. But if you were black, you were a constable, and the highest rank you'd attain was sub-inspector. They interviewed me and we had this debate, and I mean the gentleman was very respectful, but we had this debate about why someone like me should not be in the police force. So I talked about how discriminatory that was as a practice, and I said, and just while we're at it, I said, even the white women who are police officers, they just write tickets and all of that. You know, and I said, well, why can't they be fully operational? I didn't know that at the end of that maybe 8-month process that I was going to one day go for my last interview and be told, welcome to this BSAP. Incidentally, you're the first non-white to join the white ranks of this of the Rhodesian police force. So when I come to Canada and I become a police officer with Ottawa, I'm thinking, it's a different state of development. It's more advanced, it's first world. But this was where I realized that there were the most challenges. However, the resilience that I built in Rhodesia prepared me for Ottawa. I just wanted to take my kids to a place where they could become whoever they want as long as they showed up and they worked hard and all of the rest. For the most part, I encountered just wonderful people, and but where it counted from the systemic perspective, it began to be troubling, because I would make a phone call looking for work, and and I'd do an interview on the phone, and then the person would say to me, actually, you know what, I love your experience, you're the kind of person we're looking for, let's set up an interview. And so we set up an interview, and then I walk in and, oh, I'm sorry, we just hired somebody. And then I think, okay, so between yesterday and today, you could have told me yesterday that you're really considering people, but when I walk in, I notice the shift. So you're coming here and you're very sensitive. I became an advocate and an ally. And I started volunteering with organizations, especially Afro-Canadian ones, helping people to integrate into community and all. And then I missed policing though. I applied in '92, and it was, my process was going, you know. And then towards the end of my process, I decided, no, maybe that's not a good idea. So I withdrew. And then I went to do part-time work. I had been trained in the accounting field. You know, I went home and I thought, you know, I'm going to just call. This was now in '94, January '94. I thought, I'm just going to call the Ottawa Police and just see if they're hiding, because I really miss policing. So I made a call, and the lady that answered the phone, her name was Sherry Sani. And she said to me, she says, oh my goodness, she says, I was just looking at your old application and thinking to myself, I wish you would reapply, and here you are calling me. I said, okay, I guess that meant I should. And by June that year, I was in the first class. And that was the first time black female officers were hired into Ottawa Police. There were 5 of us with that first class. Going to basic training was interesting, because it's one thing if you're black, but it's quite something else when you're black and you have an accent and you're obviously not from there. So I would challenge assumptions, I'd challenge comments, I'd challenge people. And then I realized that early on that I really did have a role to play. I made a commitment to myself at 19 when I joined the BSAP. I had said to myself, whatever happens, I can never lose my femininity. I can never lose who I am as a person. I'm very happy about my blackness. I have no issue with who I am. I cannot lose that. And if people don't accept me when I walk in, then that's their problem, not mine. They'll eliminate me before I eliminate myself. So that was what I came into any space with. So then I began to mentor and coach women, mostly women and racialized women, because women also were now, you know, still at that time was a very non-traditional role for women. There's a young lady that I used to go to this church, and she had 3 young children, and she said, "No, I heard you're a police officer." I said, "Yeah." So she says, "Yeah, I've always wanted to be." She says, "But I think it's you know, I'm past that now." I said, "Well, how old are you?" She says, she was in the late 20s. I said, "Well, what makes you say you passed?" She says, "Well, I have 3 young children. I haven't worked in 7 years, and I'm a little overweight." I said, "Okay, first of all, weight is in your mind. It's you don't have to be skinny to be fit." I said, "But if it's weight you need to lose, weight can be lost and it can be found. It's whatever you want to do." So I said to her, and that thing, that notion of you having been at home for 7 years raising your children, I said, tell me, who's better at negotiation than a mother of 3 young children at the ages yours are? You know, coordination, facilitation, leading, budgeting, and all that. I said, those are skills. I said, in policing, we want skills, leadership skills, common sense, critical thinking. Who's a better critical thinker than someone? So, and she still was a little apprehensive. So I said to her, I said, listen, why don't you worry about, you know, you connect with me if you're really serious, and I'll mentor and coach you, and we'll work on getting you hired. So we did, and she got hired. This woman has done triathlons, she's done Ironmans, she travels the world, and she's an amazing police officer. But she needed somebody to just help her, to hold the mirror to her, to say, listen, this is who I see. My mother always said to us that how you impact the system is not from sitting at the sidelines and pointing out the things that are wrong with it. How you impact the system is getting into the system and learning the system, which means the education, the policies, the laws, and all of that. So that's why when I joined policing, I decided that's what I was going to do, because I didn't like what I saw at the time. But once I got into the Ottawa Police, it wasn't all just about me getting to a cruiser and going to take calls, but it was the value that I added to the men and women that I worked with, and the value that I added to community. I honestly believe that if you were to sit every one of us down, white, black, brown, whatever, we'd find that we have more common values, more shared values than differences. It's a very tumultuous relationship because of the nature of the stress or on policing, whether it's resourcing, budgeting, whatever. I don't think enough time is being invested in developing relationships. I had a situation once. I was a sergeant on patrol, and we were looking for this guy that had just, he was a wanted person, dangerous person. Then we had heard he had run into this shop, and it was a shop that was owned by a Somali lady. She's a Somali lady behind the counter. So we ran in and asked her to please, can you go down behind the counter and all that. So then we heard, oh, he's been seen somewhere, so we left, went to work with the others to try to find this guy. Nobody found him that day. However, I called the constable back and I said, hey, let's go back to that store. So he says, well, why? I said, because we have unfinished business there. So we went back there and I said, ma'am, I'm here to apologize for the intrusion. I said, but the reason we were here was, and I told her why we were there. I said, again, I'm sorry. And I was just going to leave, and she says, wait a minute. So I said, yes. So she says, have there been thefts of copper recently? Do you know of thefts of copper? I said, you know, as a matter of interest, yes, I know there's been thefts of copper. There have been. She says, well, if you are looking for, you know, here's a house number. She wrote it down. She says, in the backyard, you can find a lot of it. They've been, you know, there's a lot of it. Anyway, tell your people to go and look. And I went and told that some of the detectives, and they followed up. But the thing there was that when I came back and apologized, she realized that I was there to help. And so from then I would drop in. I would always drop in and say hello, and you know, and I began to build relationships. And I teach the constables that I worked with that don't just drive around. Get out of the car. Talk to the people in the shop owners. You're building relationships. These are the ones that help you solve crime.
Let's talk a bit about the systemic structural changes. Some people will tell you you need that in the police. You worked there for so many years. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. The systemic concept, it's very complex. It's not as simple as people would like to think it is. It's very complex. It's nuanced. It's multifaceted. I always say when I go into a group of, particularly when there's a lot of white people in the room, I always say to them, if we're going to talk about this whole issue of systemic racism, systemic barriers and all of that, I always say to them, you know, I'm addressing all of the white people in this room. I want you today to not feel blamed for the system. You and I, no one in this room created this system. Why we are here in this room is that you and I are the ones that can actually change the system so that it's actually inclusive to other people.
But do you think there's a strong will, if you like, let me call it political will, to embark on that kind of change that you're suggesting?
Well, you know what, I would, my answer to that would be, as my mom used to say, the proof is in the pudding. If you're telling me that you're baking banana bread, and then I'm not smelling it when it's baking, and when it comes out it doesn't taste like banana bread, it's probably not banana bread. We can talk and talk and talk, but if it's the results we keep getting and not the results we say we want, then there's something fundamentally wrong. Smashing the glass ceiling to me is so many things. It was gratitude, it was acknowledgement of so much, and more than anything, a thank you to myself for persevering. I am because we, the collective, are. Without you, the collective, without us, I don't exist.